Hello and welcome to your Newsmax Daily for Wednesday, November 20th, 2024, 11/20/24, the 325th day of the year, the 46th Wednesday and World Children's Day, established by the United Nations General Assembly in 1954 as Universal Children's Day. It was really created to encourage children all around the world of all races and religions to spend more time together and to learn about each other and each other's differences. And the day was also created to get governments around the world to pay more attention to the welfare of their children. If you're trying to keep up at home, Tuesday, President-elect Donald Trump named Cantor Fitzgerald CEO Howard Lutnick, another billionaire businessman, as his pick for Commerce Secretary. He named former WWE executive Linda McMahon, also a billionaire, as Education Secretary, even though he plans to dismantle the Department of Education so she could potentially have a huge role. McMahon was the small business administrator in Trump's first presidency, you may remember. And he picked Dr. Oz, Mehmet Oz, a heart surgeon, to oversee Medicare and Medicaid. Every other network is touting Dr. Oz as the TV doctor, but he's actually a heart surgeon. Dr. Oz ran unsuccessfully for a Senate seat in Pennsylvania. Meanwhile, President Biden returned to the White House late last night after his 6-day trip to Peru for the APEC summit and Brazil for the G20, where the only thing he really accomplished was promising $5 billion American dollars to help preserve the Amazon and, as I discussed yesterday, gave Ukraine the green light to go ahead and attack Russia with missiles supplied to them by the United States, leading Russian President Putin to amend Russia's doctrine on the use of nuclear weapons. It's a big, big deal. I led with it yesterday. It's a big deal, yet nobody but me and Rob Finnerty really seem to care.
A major escalation in the war in Ukraine, one that could affect every single one of us. Ukrainian President Zelensky launching the first rounds of U.S.-made ATACMS missiles at targets inside Russia in a war that's been going on now for 33 months, exactly 1,000 days. And a major line was just crossed, one that Joe Biden hasn't crossed until right now, and one that may have been deliberately crossed to drag the war, the United States, further into this war. And I mean boots on the ground when I say that. And no one seems to care. And I don't understand this. I've been watching TV all day long. The media here, too busy talking about Pete Hegseth and Matt Gaetz, which is very literally something that will not matter if we don't make it to January 20th. And right now, our incapacitated commander-in-chief, and I use that word deliberately, is walking the world right into World War III. On Sunday, while Joe Biden was walking around the rainforest, he approved the use of U.S. missiles fired from Ukraine at Russia for the very first time. Where is he going? I have no idea where he's going. He also claimed that climate change was the greatest threat to humanity, plus nuclear war.
That's why today I issued an official proclamation to support the conservation of nature around the world. Because the fight to protect our planet is literally a fight for humanity, for generations to come. It may be the only existential threat to all our nations and to all humanity that exists.
In July, they should have invoked the 25th Amendment. They should have forced Joe Biden's hand and made Kamala Harris president. They should have done that because that man right now, and it's scary, we've got 2 months to go, that man should not be president. That man should not be president. I remember when FDR was president, you'd hear stories about how he was in a wheelchair and how the media wouldn't take pictures of him in a wheelchair because they didn't want to embarrass him. And I thought to myself, that would never happen nowadays. Look at where we are right now. This is beyond FDR. It's worse than FDR. And look, I mentioned this last night. I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm only trying to point out what the rest of the world seems to be aware of. The fact remains, Russia has more nuclear weapons than any other country on the planet. And now Ukraine is firing missiles at targets inside Russia, and those missiles are made here in the U.S., and those are just the facts. The U.S. is no longer in a proxy war with Russia. The U.S. is at war with Russia. Let that sink in. And Joe Biden knows it, and he's doing this on purpose. Donald Trump be damned. Joe Biden and the trio of fools he's got in his cabinet, people that nobody voted for, Antony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, Lloyd Austin, are deliberately ignoring what you voted for 2 weeks ago. Donald Trump beat Kamala Harris. That is a fact. He beat her in the Electoral College. He beat her in the popular vote. He beat her in all 7 battleground states. And Donald Trump has unambiguously campaigned on ending the war in Ukraine. But Joe Biden is ignoring that, and he's ignoring you. And Joe Biden just took steps that might make ending the war impossible for Donald Trump in 62 days. And again, those are just the facts right now. It is also a fact that we are a whole lot closer to World War III tonight than we were yesterday. In a statement this morning from Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, quote, "The Russian Federation reserves the right to use nuclear weapons in cases of aggression with the use of conventional weapons against it," which means essentially that Russia will now use nuclear weapons if conventional weapons, like maybe missiles made in the U.S. that are fired at them. And when Joe Biden was asked about this today, when he was asked about this, about Russia using nuclear weapons, as usual, our commander-in-chief, the addled, atrophied man in the White House, couldn't be bothered because Joe Biden is doing this all on purpose. Listen.
For your birthday, will you talk to us, sir? As a gift to the press, will you please talk to us? Mr. President, President Biden, please, we haven't heard from you all trip. Mr. President!
That reporter knows what's on the line. Nuclear war. January 20th is Inauguration Day, and as I said, it cannot come fast enough, but we've got to get there first, intact. And right now, that's a question mark.
That's Rob Finnerty, and if you think he is exaggerating or hyperbolizing, is that a word? In Sweden and Finland, who shares a border with Russia, both countries distributed millions of pamphlets to their people on how to prepare for a nuclear attack, including finding shelter and stockpiling food. Europe and the rest of the world is responding. More from last night's Finnerty.
It seems like everyone realizes that there is a serious problem, everyone except us, certainly everyone except our media. Vladimir Putin changing the Russian nuclear doctrine means Putin is not joking. All of this over a country that most Americans can't find on a map. Is it really worth it? Why isn't anyone talking about this? Ukraine has turned into a never-ending gobstopper, a war with no end, a war that just goes on and on and on. What if one of these missiles misses its target and hits a school or a hospital in Russia, a missile that was made in the United States? What if? A poll conducted in Ukraine last month found that 52% of Ukrainians want this war to end. 52%. That same number was at 27% a year ago, which means the worm, as I said yesterday, has finally turned on this war here and there. And those are just the facts. And yet, for whatever reason, the uniparty neocon nonsense in Washington is so warped that we have a president of the United States right now walking this country into a war with another country, and he hasn't spoken to the leader of that country, Vladimir Putin, in 3 years. And old Joe says that he has no plans to talk to him anytime soon. Listen.
Could this improve relations with Russia? Is there any avenue for that after this prisoner exchange deal?
As my sister might say, your lips to God's ears, man.
Did you ever speak with Vladimir Putin about this? Or would you be willing to speak with Putin now directly?
I don't need to speak with Putin.
I want you to ask yourself a question tonight. Do you trust the fate of the world in the hands of a man like President Zelensky, a man that was hailed a hero for years, a man who not that long ago was one of the most popular comedians in Ukraine? This is a real video. And I want to be clear. Of course, Ukraine has every right to defend themselves with their own weapons. But the second they use our weapons, missiles made here, on Russian targets, that's when everything changes, maybe forever. Ask yourself, do you really trust Ukraine? Before the war, one of the most corrupt countries in Europe. Do you trust them with your kids and your grandkids and their futures?
Again, that's Rob Finnerty, host of Finnerty, weeknights at 8 o'clock Eastern on Newsmax. Check it out tonight. Not long after President Biden greenlighted the Ukrainian attack on Russia with American weapons, Donald Trump Jr. posted this. The military-industrial complex seems to want to make sure they get World War III going before my father has a chance to create peace and save lives. Gotta lock in those trillions. Life be damned. As usual, Don Jr. is spot on. That's absolutely and sadly and infuriatingly correct. Totally correct. There's a documentary floating around. I watched this a few years ago. It's called While the Rest of Us Die. It's incredible, about the shadow government that if you don't think exists, you're in for a rude awakening. Secret bunkers, tons of food and water and technology, pallets of cash, while the rest of us die. I'm not sure who produced it, but it is really, really good. You will thank me for watching it. President Biden has no events on his White House calendar today outside of his daily briefing. On Capitol Hill, though, FEMA Chief Deanne Criswell was questioned about the agency's employees avoiding homes in Florida with Trump signs during Hurricane Milton relief efforts. This is Congressman Jim Jordan, chair of the House Judiciary Committee.
Done inside the agency, it takes forever. I'm asking, did you talk to the 13 people on this best practices text message?
The Office of Professional Responsibility has taken this, and they are following appropriate protocol to investigate.
Is the Inspector General looking at it as well?
And I have asked the Inspector General to take a look at this.
Any idea when they're going to talk to these 13 people, since you have it? Have you talked to, how about you personally? Have you talked to any of these 13 people?
I have not talked to them.
You have not talked to any of them?
I have an entire team that focuses on this investigation, and that's what they're doing.
Seems to me it's part of a mindset that's in government. And this is the scary part, because I think it's broader. And you don't have to take my word. Take it what people have said. I mean, this reminds me, we've talked about this many times, but I can think of, well, actually the same person, let's go back to that, the same person who said that this likely received very clear guidance, this other FEMA official, also said this: I've heard from other entities who are serving in North Carolina that there was clear guidance to be mindful, quote, of the types of people who are in Western North Carolina. That's pretty derogatory stuff there, isn't it?
I have not seen it.
But you know what it sounds like? It sounds like Peter Strzok. Peter Strzok, when he said, oh, I just went into Walmart, I can smell the Trump supporters. Sounds like Joe Biden when he said, oh, the garbage I see is the Trump supporters out there. Sounds like the guys the Democrats had, the professor the Democrats had testify back in 2019 in the impeachment. Conservatives, especially very conservative people, tend to spread out, perhaps because they don't even want to be around themselves. This disdain, this mindset that's in the government where everyone's deplorable, everyone's garbage, everyone is, smelly people at Walmart, and oh, be mindful of those people in Western North Carolina. That's what it sounds like. And again, the best evidence is the text message we have, which reinforces that mindset that we have seen from so many people in our government.
The actions directed by Ms. Washington are unacceptable. And when I received this text message, I directed her termination.
That is FEMA Chief Deanne Criswell, and Ms. Washington, the employee that was fired, is pointing the finger right back at the agency, saying she was instructed to avoid homes with Trump signs or banners, and that her team wasn't the only team doing that, claiming it also happened in North Carolina, as I had claimed at the time. More from Greg Kelly reports.
Ultimately, I'm always right.
It's a great rule of thumb. Fake news, the establishment, they never give him credit. They never really think that, hey, he's the president of the United States. Maybe he's really smart. Maybe he has access to information that we don't have or we don't notice. It's a good rule of thumb. He's always right. Remember Hurricane Helene? When was that? Back in September? Really horrible, nasty storm. Hit so much of the South, especially Western North Carolina. And it was a botched response. FEMA and a lot of other entities screwed up big time.
Everyone's just cleaning up for themselves. There's been no outside help. We need some help from government or somebody.
What's your message for the state and for the federal government?
Get down here and help us. Get here. We need help here now. We need it now.
Yeah, and the whole country has noticed that over the past, 3.5 years, 4 years, illegal migrants have gotten all kinds of help, and other people have been shortchanged. President Trump certainly picked up on that, didn't he?
Just consider FEMA. F-E-M-A. You know what that is, right? the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and you read about now all the time, because there's nobody that's handled a hurricane or storm worse than what they're doing right now. Kamala spent all her FEMA money, billions of dollars, on housing for illegal migrants, many of whom should not be in our country.
All right. That's baseless. He said it without evidence. That's been debunked. Here's some more evidence. No, that's disinformation. Here's some more evidence. That's misinformation. Here is the employee who said it was happening, okay? All of this stuff, from the misdirection of funds to blowing off Trump supporters. And there they are today. Okay, it happened, but it's not officially our policy for it to happen.
I am saying that FEMA's mission is to help all people.
What let's have is the actual screenshot. Can you put the screenshot up on the screen? Let's look at what the text message said. The text message said, implement best practices. Like, this is the best practices. We're going to implement them. And they talk about making sure you're going in pairs or with more than one person, avoid the Trump homes, drink your water, take your towel, coconut waters. So stay hydrated, walk with someone else, and don't go to the Trump homes. It seems pretty common and matter of fact in the actual evidence we do have, the text message itself. But you're still saying Miss Washington and this other person aren't telling the truth.
When I received this text message, it was not in accordance with the way we conduct business at FEMA.
Spoken like a person who has talked to the lawyers for 2 days and handled practice questions. And the people with the Trump signs on the front of the house didn't get help. All right, you can dress it up. And it's good to see these people in the hot seat. But again, they got so much bureaucratic prep and barriers, right? They're getting kind of good at it. They're getting good at the deception.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator Criswell, is Miss Washington lying to us?
Miss Washington has...
She said it's common practice. You said it's reprehensible and isolated. Both statements can't be true. So someone's not giving us the facts. And I'm kind of trying to figure out who's not telling the truth.
The actions that Miss Washington took were unacceptable.
Well, you had another employee. Now, they remain anonymous, but I think one of my colleagues pointed this out earlier. A FEMA official who spoke on condition of anonymity said Miss Washington likely received, quote, very clear guidance from her supervisors. Is that person lying too?
I have not received any evidence outside of the screenshot that Miss Washington directed.
So those
her
two
team.
people are wrong. They're not telling the truth to us.
We are currently investigating.
Right? How's that for the establishment? We have no evidence. An investigation is underway, and it will be out the moment you guys stop looking in our direction. And then we'll just make it go away. The people with the Trump signs on their house didn't get help. It was their policy. They got caught, and it's under review. It's unacceptable, not illegal, not immoral, unacceptable.
That's Greg Kelly, host of Greg Kelly Reports. Check it out at 9 o'clock tonight. Democrat Jamie Raskin is also a member of the committee. His tone was, of course, a little different than that of Chairman Jim Jordan or James Comer.
We could be here today celebrating the workforce of 22,000 FEMA workers, but instead we are invited to focus on one so-called intermittent employee in Florida whose team encountered what she called political hostility while canvassing door-to-door for FEMA in Florida.
That is not at all what it's like, because they have the actual text messages. And again, it's like, oh, one employee out of thousands. What's the big deal? So a few people didn't get the help they needed when they needed it. He wouldn't be saying that, right? If it were reverse, if the homes with Harris signs were skipped, it would be a big deal then, and it would be racist and sexist. And don't forget about our neighbors along parts of Florida's west coast and in the Big Bend area and in western North Carolina. There are a lot of people that are still struggling to put their lives back together. People that lost everything. Continue to donate and continue to do whatever you can to help. The recovery is still continuing, believe me. And let's go to Rob Schmitt tonight for discussion on President Trump's deportation plan.
Trump confirming this week he'll declare a national emergency on immigration, much warranted, and use Pentagon money and our military for mass deportations once he gets into office. Now, those working closely with Trump on immigration also pledging to bring back Remain in Mexico, a very successful policy that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris ended as they worked to destroy the sovereignty of this country about 4 years ago. Trump has a much-needed ally in Senator Rand Paul, who's going to head the Senate Homeland Security Committee and has pledged to bring back Remain in Mexico. And Senator Rand Paul joins us now. And, sir, it's good to have you back on. Remain in Mexico forces asylum seekers to wait for their cases to be heard in Mexico. You say the Homeland Security Committee's first hearing will be about reinstating that policy. Will this be more effective doing it this way than just an executive order?
Well, I think executive order will be in order at the time Trump comes in. But the thing is that in addition to that, there are some policies that we need to address. For example, most people see the images of people coming across the river and don't understand why they can't be placed right back on the other side. Why people come across the river and they're coming through concertina wire, and our Border Patrol's cutting the wire to give them access to our country. So I think we need to address what are the legalities, what are the rules that can be changed, what can be done through executive order, and what requires legislation. But I'm for all of the above. My understanding is that immigration law says that the president may admit migrants to this country under asylum. It doesn't say shall. So I think the president has the prerogative, whether there's a pandemic or not, the president has the prerogative to say we're full and we're simply not taking migrants for asylum at this time. I think the president has that much leeway. So I think he can, through executive order, simply say no more. But we have to also address what the policy is for those coming across the border. Are we going to process them and say, no, you can't come after we processed you in our country? Yep. No, I think they should be immediately placed back on the other side. And what happens is the people coming from all over Central America and South America, they don't want to stay in Mexico. They want to come to America. So when they're forced to stay there while it's processed, guess what? They quit coming. It slows down the flow.
Yeah, I mean, and to all these blue state leaders, that are vowing to fight this, Tom Homan said last night that, that they can't prevent that. They're not allowed to stand in the way of the federal government going after illegals in the country. Does that sound accurate to you? I mean, if blue state leaders try to stand in the way, is there something that can be done to move them out of the way?
I think what I would do if I were in charge of the immigration situation would be to first to go after those who have committed crimes. The big news right before the election was that there were 15,000 people in our country who have committed murder. There are about 13,000 that have committed sex crimes, violent sex crimes. That's 28,000 people. Why don't we start with that 28,000? Why don't we put out an all points bulletin and when we have them removed? I think if we start there, we'll be fine. I'm not in favor of sending the Army in uniforms into our cities to collect people. I think it's a terrible image, and that's not what we use our military for. We never have, and it's actually been illegal for over 100 years to bring the Army into our cities. Army and our military are trained to shoot the enemy. They're not trained to get a warrant to do what they're doing. The police have a difficult job, but the people removing people from our country need to be a police enforcement domestic agency, not the military. I'm all for Remain in Mexico, I will not support an emergency to put the Army into our cities. I think that's a huge mistake.
Do you think that's what Trump is intending to do?
Well, that's what he said yesterday, or his spokesman said. The stories all said he would declare an emergency to use the military to remove people. I'm not for that. I'm not for really most presidential emergencies because they smack of martial rule. They smack of no congressional approval. They smack of no checks and balances. So, look, I'm supportive of President Trump. I'm supportive of removing people illegally here, particularly people who have committed crimes. But I'm not for the Army marching up and down our streets. I think it's a terrible image to send the world. It's a terrible image for us as citizens. And so I hope he will think twice about trying to use an emergency edict to have the Army patrolling our country.
Kentucky Senator Rand Paul on Rob Schmitt Tonight. Donald Trump did say that he would declare a national emergency, but from what I've seen and heard, he has not made it clear on if he would use military force or not. As for dangerous criminals coming into the country, Georgia prosecutors yesterday rested their case against Jose Ibarra, the man prosecutors say raped and killed 22-year-old Laken Riley back in February. His defense trying to undermine the way that the DNA in the case was analyzed. A new form of analysis apparently was used that gets deeper into the strands of DNA that comes up with statistics of just how improbable it was that anyone other than Jose Ibarra could have committed the murder. Even though Georgia is a death penalty state, Ibarra is facing life in prison without parole, which is just another big waste of taxpayer money. And the geniuses that run Los Angeles, California, voted yesterday to adopt a sanctuary city ordinance after President-elect Trump's promise to carry out mass deportations. In a 13-0 vote, they voted to prohibit Los Angeles from providing any city resources or personnel to be used to help federal enforcement of immigration laws. I believe Rand Paul said they cannot stand in the way of federal enforcement, but in a case like that, maybe that's when the military would be used. Only time will tell, and it's not going to be that much time. Yesterday, I talked about Trump meeting with Joe Scarborough and his wife, Mika Brzezinski Scarborough of MSNBC. Back to Rob Schmitt for more on that.
Welcome back. Time now for news from the left. Breaking this evening, the Wall Street Journal reporting that Comcast has greenlit a $7 billion spinoff of NBC Universal's cable channels. The company is going to reportedly separate off entertainment and news channels like MSNBC, CNBC, Golf Channel, Oxygen, etc., moving them all away from their main product and the main hub, which is NBC News and also streaming and other things. Splitting MSNBC and CNBC away from NBC News. And with that, it's kind of interesting, seeing kind of what that means. Maybe they're believing a little bit less in cable. That brings us over to Morning Joe, where after facing immense backlash for reestablishing contact with President-elect Trump at Mar-a-Lago, the Morning Joe social media page today actually disabled the comments on X. So they're getting hit with pretty heavy fire because of all the things that they've said about Trump, all the vilification, and then going over to Mar-a-Lago to have breakfast with Trump. On this morning show, Joe Scarborough claimed that there is a total disconnect on social media. He says that most of what he has heard in response to what happened has been very positive and supportive.
Yesterday, I saw for the first time what a massive disconnect there was between social media and the real world, because we were flooded with phone calls from people all day, literally around the world. Very positive, very supportive.
Very positive, very supportive. Well, we'll see how that works out. Here's what social media looks like, by the way. Keith Olbermann, one of the loudest voices out there, says Joe's been lying since 1998. And if you go on with Joe or you watch Joe, you are mainstreaming his self-serving, unprincipled lying. Somebody at MSNBC needs to speak up for the truth and for a network Scarborough is now destroying. There are hundreds of tweets just like that all over the place from people that have been watching this show for a very long time. Jon Stewart, The Daily Show, torched it. Take a listen to this.
Joe and Mika Brzezinski Scarborough, who famously warned of the growing threat of Trump's fascism, also had an interesting announcement to make.
For those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we?
Because you said he was Hitler. Mr. President, your rhetoric is outrageous. I cannot in good conscience. Ooh, are those macaroons?
He is funny. You got to give him that.
Again, Rob Schmitt tonight is at 7 o'clock Eastern on Newsmax. On Wall Street, stock markets open in the green this morning with anticipation of AI giant NVIDIA's earnings, which will come out after the bell today. The outcome of their earnings call analysis and what analysts say about it could drive the markets tomorrow, so watch out for that. Could be big, could be bad. No surprise, but Target again posted lower than expected earnings and also lowered their guidance looking ahead. That news out this morning, the NVIDIA news coming, as I said, after the bell today. about 4:05 Eastern. Keep up with all of the news and breaking developments on Newsmax, N2, and Newsmax.com. Beginning each and every day with Wake Up America, National Report, The Chris Salcedo Show, Greta Van Susteren, Rob Schmitt, Finnerty, Greg Kelly, Bianca De La Garza, Todd Starnes, Ed Henry, and analysis from people like Governor Mike Huckabee, Senator Rick Santorum, political analyst Mark Halpern, Judge Napolitano, and many, many others. I'm Tony Marino. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Newsmax Daily. Continue to share it with your friends and family, or basically anybody. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Hey, it's Jerry Callahan from The Callahan Show. You can listen to us every day. We react to the latest news, politics, sports, and all the madness in the world. I'll give you my opinion with a little edge, a little attitude. I'm an unapologetic right-winger, trapped behind enemy lines in deep blue Boston, so I'm used to taking on the mainstream media mob. You can hear us anywhere you get your podcast, or you can listen every day at newsmax.com/listen.
Information. Truth. Is freedom. Is Newsmax.